Hey, welcome back for another episode of the Chiefs Outsiders podcast. Now, this isn't going to be nearly as fun as the last few we've done because it was a pretty terrible game by the Kansas City Chiefs at a time when they really couldn't afford it. I mean, think about what our schedule looks like and how badly we needed to cruise in this one.
Yeah, it was a real opportunity for the Chiefs to get a comfortable lead in the division.
You're looking at a division we thought was going to be incredible, and everybody's faltering. And that's when you need to shine, and we lost that opportunity. So we're sitting here tied with the Broncos, coming up with a schedule. I know the next two games, but let me look at the whole thing. So we've got the Bucks, Raiders, and Bills. The good news is the Raiders don't look quite as feisty as they once did, but obviously we can't take anyone for granted at this point. So the Bucks actually do look beatable because their defense looks fantastic, but offensively they're not doing a whole lot. So that feels like a pick'em game. Sunday night football, Brady's probably going to have a good night, but he hasn't so far. All right, anyway, enough about that. We lost an opportunity to capitalize against a team that, even after they beat us, I'm going to say confidently, that's not that good of a football team. They've got some playmakers on defense. Matt Ryan can make some throws, but he gets rattled easy. So let's talk about, no beating around the bush. Let's talk about the obvious reason that we lost this football game: special teams.
It's very rare that you find an NFL game where the special teams for both teams has as many errors as the Chiefs special teams alone had in that game.
And so I saw these comments like, one was, we got to do something because Andy Reid has lost his ability to make critical decisions like firing Eric Bieniemy and Dave Tobe.
Yeah.
You can have any opinion you want on Bieniemy because he's seems to be having some disputes with the franchise quarterback. We don't really know. None of us really know what he contributes or what he doesn't. But to say that Andy Reid should fire Dave Tobe is just ridiculous. That combination has been in Kansas City for 10 years, and in those 10 years, we have had pretty much dominant special teams units.
I think they've been the DVOA rankings have been top 5. I think it's top 6 every year he's been here.
Yeah, fantastic special teams for 10 years, and one game where we were ridiculously bad does not mean you fire the guy. You're talking about one of the only guys I've ever heard of getting serious consideration as a head coach coming from special teams. So that's a ridiculous commentary, but it doesn't take away from how bad this performance was. When you've got your special teams, you've got multiple coverage units, but your kicker and your punter are are a pretty big part of it, and we were without one of the best kickers in the league, and the repercussions from that were felt all through the game.
That fake, it's just the most glaring, shining example of not trusting your kicker. There was no reason to fake that ball on a 4th and 10. And if you're going to throw the football on 4th and 10, I recommend Patrick Mahomes be the one throwing it.
And we're going to get into all of these plays, but if you're going to be the 4th and 10 fake field goal team, you should also be the go for it from the 2-yard line, go for the touchdown team. But hey, let's go chronological and talk about how bad these special teams were. Start with the opening kickoff. They bring it out to the 34-yard line. That in itself, no big deal, but that's a win for their special teams. The next special teams play of the game, we had the fumbled punt, which leads to 7 points. Now, they were immediately gifted 7 points at the beginning of the game by a muffed punt. And then they basically did nothing offensively for the next 57 minutes of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So They basically would have had nothing, and even in their own minds felt like they were out of it without that touchdown. So then, what happens on the next punt?
Sky was he was very unsure about fielding it, and he let it bounce at about the 6 or the 7, and it ends up on the 1.
I felt like you were kind of defending that. We just rewatched it, and he was saying, there's a lot of traffic in there. And I'm not saying that's easy, but you have to field that ball at the 15-yard line. If that's at the 9 and you want to let it bounce, but at the 15, you can't give up all that field position, and there's no chance that or there's not a very good chance that that's going into the end zone. And that was just being gun shy. And I honestly I don't know if Sky Moore needs to be our punt returner. Not just based on that, but I kind of almost feel like McCole Hardman, if you're not giving him the ball on offense, if you're not featuring him on as a main
And
staple of the offense, then
they are absolutely not doing that.
he has speed. He's a weapon. Having return kicks.
I agree. I think, and that's the thing. Uncle Dave, I just call him that naturally. Dave Tobe, when they talked about it before the season, it was that you don't want McCole being returning punts because that automatically takes him out of the first play of the series on offense. And it's just
We have a better way of taking him out of the play is by not ever targeting him.
right. He had one target, and it wasn't even an actual pass. It was a jet sweep for 2 yards in that loss.
Before we talk about McCole Hardman for an hour, I want to go through all of these special teams plays. So he's afraid to field the next one. We get pinned back, which results in a failed drive. It affects the next drive. Okay, then we've got a kick return, and we only get to the 20. One of many kick returns that we don't get back to the 25, which is obviously the touchback mark. Then we've got a punt. There's a good punt. Looks like maybe could have been down at the 1. Lamons runs up, takes it on one bounce at the 11. The odds that goes deeper and could have been fielded inside the 5, I'd say about 75% chance that we could have fielded that inside the 5.
Yeah, it looked like it was taking a Kansas City bounce.
Is it possible it comes back the other way? Yes, but you just surround the ball there and don't let it.
The
You don't
difference
catch that ball.
The 11 and the 5 versus the 11 and the 14, that's a swing.
That's not a game-changing play necessarily, but when you couple it with all the other ones, they had a plus 14 yardage in the first set of kick returns. Okay? Then we miss an extra point. They come back and make up for that. It didn't really hurt us at the end of the day because after 2 touchdowns, we had 14 points. But it's putting it in the coaching staff's head that we can't kick the ball. Okay, so then we kick off. Indianapolis, once again, they return it out to the 28, and then our next kick return gets out to the 14 because Pacheco thought he was Dante Hall and was going to reverse field on the whole team.
It's tough, and that's the thing I think whenever you're analyzing how bad the special teams was, is we talked about it a lot all offseason, how the young guys on all these draft picks are going to play a heavy role in special teams, and Dave Tobe is used to having his guys, and there's been a lot of carryover for several years now of special team snaps. Dorian O'Daniel, Ben Neiman, Armani Watts, guys like that have been playing hundreds of special team snaps for 4 or 5 years, and you lose all those guys in one offseason. You're gonna have mistakes, especially if you replace almost all of them with rookies.
So the camera kept going to Tobe and Andy Reid talking, and I'm sure there was. Let's recreate that conversation. Hey, Dave. Why are we sucking right now?
Sorry,
I don't want any excuses. Okay, so they're standing there talking, and I think, does Dave ever said you should have let me keep my guy? They give him some roster say, but when you lose guys, it makes a difference. But that was a bad play. The way that kickoffs are done now, kickoff returns are not nearly as much of a weapon as they used to be. Usually, if a ball's returnable, it's because they decided to kick it high and the coverage is pretty good. You need to get upfield. And I don't think Pacheco's taking a whole lot of them are all the way across the field and up. Okay, then we'll throw in that Tommy Townsend had a great day.
He's
He's been
having
solid throughout.
Yeah, he's having a strong year to this point.
A lot of field changing plays by Townsend all year. Then the two teams traded short field goals. Then we get another kickoff to us, and Pacheco, with no one around him around the 7-yard line, just falls down.
He cut so hard that he fell and fumbled the ball.
And I like Pacheco. I'm not even like, this isn't Bash Pacheco Day. It's our special teams were terrible. And when you start, if you know, their first punt to the 34 has a lot different feeling than Pacheco falling down and fumbling at the 7, and we started drive at the 10. Then we had the fake field goal.
Which
And then we ended the game with Pacheco fielding a ball on the goal line, running around for several seconds and getting tackled at like the 12.
And my only thing, the penalty on Indianapolis bailed them out in that one, gave them a shot to go tie the game. But my only thing on that last return is just the way Dave Tobe's special teams units get talked about, the way he talks about how he wants guys to be aggressive. Knowing that that ball was kicked right to the goal line, which again, with how good these kickers are, that was intentional. They were not putting that ball out of the back of the end zone and letting no time come off. They wanted the clock running for at least 2 or 3 seconds there.
Now, it does seem to me like those are situations where you've coached them up. They know what you want them to do. But as they're going out, you say, hey, on this one, don't bring it out unless the seas part. Other than that, we'd rather not run 11 seconds off when we only have 24 seconds, 29 seconds, whatever it was. So that's just item by item, bad special teams play over and over and over. Let's talk about the points that it affected this game in a way that we'll get into that last drive and the Colts scoring. But when you talk about that they had any kind of hope left, 1,000 things had to go wrong for us, for the Chiefs, and we'll get into all those, but not even all of them, just the special teams. They get 7 points at the beginning when our defense is shutting them down. We gift them 7 points. Then we have the 2 field goal opportunities. Right there's 13 points, and we were up 4. That should have been a 17-point game with just average special teams play.
No doubt.
All right, I've done a lot of talking about special teams. Let's get into the positives. Let's talk about this Chiefs defense.
So yeah, most of the guys who you would say played well in this game are on the defensive side of the ball, and I'll take a second right here to appreciate that, because especially in the offseason, whenever you're talking about how much you're going to be relying on young guys all over the board and free agent acquisitions, this defense has been good from the jump. There's no caveat to that. There's no asterisk. It's been a legitimately good unit.
Now let's say that the Colts offense is below average. They do still have some talent there. And I felt like the Chiefs defense was, I would use the word dominant against the Colts.
All day. Nick Bolton had a really strong day. It was all over the place. Darius Harris played really well, filling in for Willie Gay. L'Jarius Sneed had a really strong day. I thought Justin Reed was really good, especially coming down in run support.
On the few big plays that the Colts had, there were several of them where we had our hands on a ball, like the one that Sneed almost intercepted and took back the other way, or at least intercepted. He got both hands on that, and then that was one of their biggest plays of the day. So we even played it well when we had them on the goal line, and they got the route up the sideline, and that was Jalen Watson, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was in good position on that play. It's a jump ball. They come down with it.
And you just said a few minutes ago before this that, and you're not the only person I've heard say this, that if Jalen Watson had been the first round pick, not based on the draft grade, any of that. Obviously, if they had reached on that, that would have been ridiculous. But just based on how he has appeared on the field and the production, he is absolutely playing really well. He had a what could have been if they had made the stop at the end, a game-saving play on a pass breakup near the end zone.
Whenever that guy's been in the league now for 3 games, and I feel really confident about him out there. I mean, I feel like if McDuffie is who we think he is, then we've added 3, at least 2, but possibly 3 legitimate secondary players in this draft, because Cook looks like he can probably play, even though he's not being featured right now. All right, so big plays, man. Every time we blitzed, it felt like we got home. The corners timed their blitz really well. We had Snead and
Jalen Watson,
Watson
the
blitzing.
first play of the game, they blitzed Jalen Watson.
We had Snead and Watson both making big plays in the run game. Thornhill, there was a play where they threw a little wide receiver screen and they had 3 blockers and we had 2 tacklers out there. And Thornhill didn't care about any of that. He just blew it up. I felt like our secondary was really good, except for Rashad Fenton. Rashad Fenton had moments in the last couple years where he looked like a good cover corner, but this year he really looks like a liability, and hopefully McDuffie comes back and shores that up.
And it really is. There's just a little bit. I'm not going to exaggerate it and make it seem like it's every snap, but there is a little bit through 3 games of whoever 27 is on offense being run. Of like, if it's 3rd and 8 and you've got a matchup you like on Rashad Fenton, you're going there every time.
Yeah, and plays are being made on Jalen Watson, but he's following that up by making big plays of his own. So then I think the most underrated player of the game, and probably other people noticed it too, but Colin Saunders was a monster in this game.
Stood out multiple times in the
Repeatedly,
run and pass.
there's the plays that you expect your interior lineman to make where they clog up a play and stop a run, but then he also sometimes will track something down. There was one where it looked like Taylor was going to burst through, and Colin Saunders dragged him down for like a 4-yard gain. But we rewatched it, and I really think he might have broken that big if Saunders didn't get him there. So I thought Saunders had a great day. I also thought Dunlap had a great day. Well, I mean, everyone's going to credit him that because he got the strip fumble, but he made a lot of other plays.
That's almost a forgotten play in the game for me because the Chiefs didn't capitalize on it.
You know, the defense was great in part because Matt Ryan is only a good quarterback if there's no pressure. If you pressure Ryan, he folds more. So 10 years ago,
He literally folded on the Snead sack. His legs like touched his helmet.
10 years ago, it felt like you could be a premier NFL quarterback without any escapability. Now, you've at least got to be able to shake someone and sidestep someone. You can't just go down like that and be a premier quarterback. So he did not handle pressure well, but we applied a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
2 more players I thought looked good. Darius Harris is not Willie Gay, but he's also not bad.
He looked like he should have been playing last year. I'll say that.
I would not take Anthony Hitchens
No.
over Darius Harris.
Mhm.
And Frank Clark stepped up and made some plays. Nothing dynamic. He wasn't a game wrecker, but we noticed him quite a bit on the rewatch.
The one sack he had was a really impressive rush. I mean, if I had to guess, the guard, had a false step or something that because it's not a very common thing you see a lineman completely on their back like that, but Frank Clark had a very effective bull rush for that sack.
So we had 3 takeaways that were legitimately great defensive plays, taking the ball away. And then we had the big 4th down stop where Bolton meets Taylor at the high point. Can't do it any better. Well executed. But as you go back and rewatch it also, why was he jumping from 3 yards behind the line to gain? And Naughty forced his way under the guard and just made a pile up and forced that early takeoff. And Dunlap was also hitting his legs at the same time Bolton was meeting him at the high point.
Mhm.
So at, when you watch a game and you feel like that was one of the worst played Chiefs games and this massive missed opportunity and you're angry, it's important, I think, to go back and acknowledge all the things that they did well. And if the defense plays at this level all year, we're going to win 13 games like we usually do.
Right. And we've barely mentioned the offense at all, but even if you take that first deep ball to Marquez as it was, and that's an incomplete pass, which that was potentially one of the biggest plays of the game. But even without that, we are one Travis Kelsey drop. It was a really tough catch in the back of the end zone with a defender on him. But we are one Travis Kelsey drop away from a comfortable win and just a fine game. Nothing special, nothing fantastic, but it would have been a nice, easy win.
There were 7 or 8 times we could have won that game with a routine play we always make. And on the rewatch, the offense felt better than it was watching it live
Yes.
because we made a lot of plays and we were not going 3 and out and just giving the ball back. It was always 50-yard drive and then settle for a field goal. 50-yard drive and fake a field goal, 50-yard drive and miss a field goal, and you only get so many drives. So when you talk about the offensive performance, first, you had a chance at a potential touchdown play or at least a long play to Scantling, just overthrown. Sometimes I think Pat needs to put a little bit more air under the ball. And then we get pinned back by bad special teams play and get a little bit conservative. And Gilmore makes a fantastic tackle when it looks like Kelsey's about to break one. So you only get a few drives per game, 7, 8 drives a game. And right there's 2 that were just that close. And then after that, all of our drives were more successful. We just didn't cash them in for points.
The offense really was not it was not terrible. It wasn't what we're used to seeing. It was not some, just every drive is 80 yards kind of thing, but it was fine and even like it was okay. But I think this was absolutely a case of a let's try and get in here with a vanilla game plan and just get out with a win because we're better than the Colts and I'm sure that when Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes see Gus Bradley on the other sideline, who they scored 89 points against in 2 games last year with the Raiders, I think this was a let's give them about 80% and see if we can get out with a win.
Yeah, and I hope that's not the case, but there's just no way for us to know that. So I want to talk about 2 other things. One is big picture, couple performances. Scantling is catching every ball that's thrown to him. He's been replacement level at least. Not targeted a whole lot, but he's been making the plays when they're there. Juju is also making the plays when they're there, and it feels like, man, we almost need to get him the ball a little bit more. There are a couple times when I thought we were locked in on Kelsey too much, which is usually a good thing, but the new receivers seem to be fitting okay, and we have to keep a little patience with the fact that this is 4 of our 5 receivers are new this year, and it can take a little bit to get the timing right.
I do like this receiver room still. I think Sky Moore needs a lot more snaps. I don't think that's a debate. I think Sky Moore and Travis Kelsey are really the only 2 guys on offense that are set up to consistently beat man to man coverage. Because Marquez has got speed, but it's more of a long speed. He's got to kind of build up. It's like by the time he runs that 30-yard post, yeah, he's moving. And then Juju's not a guy who's really separating. He can make contested catches but he's not beating guys when in man. Sky Moore can do that and had only 9 snaps in this game.
Yeah, so we don't know the story there, but he's playing behind Justin Watson. So, but the other big talking point is Orlando Brown, who last year I felt like was a below average left tackle in the NFL. Not terrible because he does some things exceptionally well. For the most part, he does not get bull rushed. He does not get beat on the inside move, but any good edge rusher can beat him around the outside, and your only hope is that he just pushes the guy out enough that Pat can step up. And that's not when he wants to be the highest paid tackle in the NFL. We cannot be sitting here talking about he's just good enough if he'll push the guy outside and Pat can step up.
Here's all that it's not all I will say, but it's all that needs to be said. PFF had Orlando Brown charted with 9 pressures in this game, and that's just ridiculous. I mean, 9 pressures you're talking about from the defense. You're saying that's a pretty good day for the defensive line as a whole, and that was one guy gave that up.
So we've been defending the team's decision to move on from Tyreek Hill because we got so much draft capital. But part of the talking point is that they did that because they wanted to keep some money for Orlando Brown. And I hope that's not the case because he deserves to be paid like an. There's like this trend in the NFL that every time someone who starts comes up for a new contract, they need to be the highest paid in the NFL. Orlando Brown does not deserve to be the highest paid left tackle in the NFL because he's not one of the best left tackles in the NFL.
And him turning down a 6-year, $140 million contract 2 or 3 months ago is absolutely going to go down as one of the biggest fumbles in his career, but it might be a big time wow, we
Well,
dodged a bullet on that one because I don't hate the player. I really don't. I think there is a way, a path to him being a top 6, 7 tackle in the NFL. But we are not seeing it. And
I'm all right with him starting for the Chiefs.
I think he's a fine
I
player.
just don't think you can pay him big money. And if he demands, which he will, he's going to demand that he should be one of the highest paid tackles in the league next year. I say it's time to give Lucas Niang a chance over there and draft somebody else and see what we can make happen. But
That's the only drawback to that situation is the Chiefs spent a first round pick on Orlando Brown 2 years ago. And if they have to do it again next year on his replacement, that is not ideal at all.
so when you look at the offense, and we were talking about you just don't get that many opportunities. If you take away the last drive with 29 seconds or 24 seconds left, Kansas City had 3 possessions in the second half of that game. All 3 were sustained drives inside the 25-yard line, and 3 trips inside the 25, you come away with 3 points. Now, on the first field goal, you've got Kelsey being shoved with 2 hands out of the back of the end zone, and there was no pass interference call, not even a conversation about should there be one, when defender does not look back at the ball, and Kelsey is trying to go to the ball, and he's got both hands on him, pushing him backward. Now, that play isn't being talked about. I guess part of it is because Kelsey didn't throw a fit and the ref and the announcers didn't say a word. But we rewatched it a couple times, and that's as much of a clear-cut pass interference as you can have.
And the ball was absolutely like it was a catchable ball. It was right on the defender's hip, and the defender was not playing the ball. If Travis Kelsey can disengage from being grabbed at both shoulders, that's a touchdown.
So then you also have a ball in the end zone that Mahomes kind of throws it back shoulder, and Kelsey didn't go back shoulder, didn't get turned quick enough. They they connect on that 90% of the time.
It's a tough catch, but you expect a Hall of Fame, one of the greatest tight ends in the history of the league to make.
And so right there, touchdown ends the game because the Colts could not move the ball on our defense. They couldn't do anything against us. And touchdown ends the game right there. We don't get it. Also, you've got a play where Mahomes just trips and falls down. I mean, this is a guy who's so nifty in the pocket. He always makes something out of nothing. Even if it's not completed, he's got that escapability and he gets a throw off. And then he had one where in the red zone and he just falls down. I mean, these are just a list of unexpected or things that wouldn't normally happen that had to happen for Indianapolis to win. We had all the special teams miscues. We had that happening in the red zone, a no call on a penalty. And the end result is we got in the inside scoring zone 3 times and got 3 points. Now, how much of that is offensive execution and how much of it is on the coaching staff is always hard to say.
And play calling in this game, I think generally was that's what I was trying to say earlier, I guess, is how it was so vanilla is and it's maybe it's not the game plan. Maybe it's just like we talk about that this team kind of has a couple of these games every year and it's like the 2nd and 10 shotgun runs just every time it's a drive killer every single time, and I don't get it either because it's they always try and run like a sweep out of the shotgun with Clyde, and it's that is not what he's good at. That's not really what the line is good at. I hate that play call every time, and it happens about 20 times a year on 2nd and 10.
Yeah, and it's one of those things with the running game. If the other team wins the line of scrimmage, then the coaches look dumb for trying that play sometimes. So it's hard to really put the blame on that. But I left the first watch of the game saying that we messed up a lot on offense. And I mean, it it always just comes down to a few
It
plays.
was really close to being a no contest, but
Okay, so now let's talk about the biggest controversial play of the game. We stopped them on the final drive, ready to win the game again, and Chris Jones does what he does. And I mean, watching that live, what did you think about that penalty?
I mean, I think it's obviously as a Chiefs fan, I'm not going to like that penalty, but as an objective NFL fan, I think that that's soft regardless. I mean, I definitely know that whenever, 20 years ago, there was no chance of a flag being thrown for something like that. The game has changed, we all know that. The taunting and the officiating on that stuff is way different. I'm sure Chris Jones said something inappropriate, something he shouldn't have said, but that's a soft penalty. It really is.
So, I have a problem in general with inconsistency in the way those taunting penalties are called. It feels like I can watch a guy stand over someone else and yell 8 times and it gets called once. And, oh, they said a magic word. Well, we can't hear what they're saying, but there's a lot of inconsistency with the way that's called. Now, as I was watching it live, I had no thought whatsoever about that being something they shouldn't have called. I was watching Chris Jones. I said, stop, stop. You have to stop doing that. They're going to call a penalty and you're going to lose us this game. And he kept going. And I put that on Chris Jones, not the officials. I feel like I'm not someone who never blames officials. I think they messed up on the Kelsey play in the end zone. But that's on Chris Jones, whether they should have called it or not.
And I mean, we talked about it earlier that his post game presser right outside of the Colts locker room, whatever it was, that's his. I mean, Chris is a guy we know, how much he loves the game and how much he loves Kansas City, and he's a guy that wears his heart on his sleeve. But man, it legitimately sounded like he was gonna start crying, and he said, that he takes full responsibility for the loss and all this, and he approached it in the right way post game. There's no doubt about that.
When it comes to after the play penalties, the taunting and stuff, those are the things I can't stand, even if they don't affect the game. It just drives me crazy when someone talks their way into hurting the team.
And then, You want to talk about inconsistency with officiating? I didn't even notice. I saw this literally just a couple of hours ago. Didn't notice it during the game. I didn't. I haven't seen. I've seen one person mention it, and it was after. I don't think it was the PAT. I believe it was the missed field goal in the fourth quarter. Rodney McLeod, who I did not know was even still in the league. He's been in the league for a long time. Was standing face to face with Matt Amendola after the missed field goal, clearly taunting him. I'm sure he was saying something there, but that's not the bad part. He reached out and patted him on the helmet, standing face to face after a missed field goal. And it's
Sound-
like, that is the definition of taunting.
That sounds like taunting to me.
But
And we almost forgot another one. Think on the list of things that had to happen for the Colts to win this game. Pat Mahomes had his face mask grabbed. It was pulled, it turned his head, it was right in front of the official. The official threw a flag, and then they said, never mind.
it would have been offsetting penalties to that was one of the stall outs on the field in the red zone in the second half was I think it was a 3rd and 7 and it would have been offsetting penalties and the Chiefs would have had another shot.
So we all think that this is a championship caliber football team, and they did not play like one against the Colts. But the only everyone admits that we have to play better than that to get where we want to go. But I want to point out that this happens every year to pretty much all the good teams. And, it happens to the Chargers 9 times a year, and it happens to the Chiefs about 2 or 3. And it's frustrating every time. But just for some examples, last year, this team started 3-4, with 2 of the 4 losses being dominating blowout losses. So, but then after getting dominated twice to start the season, they came back to go on an epic run and be dominating at halftime of the AFC Championship game, just that close to going to another Super Bowl. And there was a point in that season where they played a lot worse than they did against the Colts. Then you've got the year before, got kind of ran out of their own house by the Raiders, who were a sub 500 football team.
That game was maddening. I still remember that. It was Deshaun Jackson was burning the Chiefs like it was 2010 and
It was Derek, Joe Montana, Carr. I don't know what was going on. That was in 2020 when they really would have been 15-1, except they didn't play the last. That was like the best Chiefs team we've seen in the regular season, and they got dominated by the sub 500 Raiders that year. 2019, back-to-back losses to the Colts and Texans. That was not a good Colts team. That was not a playoff Colts team, and they lost that game 19-13, and the offense looked completely inept in that game.
I was going to say there was no reason for optimism after that Colts loss in 2019.
Talking about anything pre-Andy Reid is pointless, and pre-Mahomes is a little bit pointless, but 2017 Andy Reid team, 6 losses in a 7-game stretch, finished with 11 wins.
That was an Alex Smith team that was faltering mid-year and still managed to make the playoffs, if I remember.
And that was the year we lost 18-16 in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But after losing 6 of 7 games, I mean, that how much more of a low point in a season can you have than that? Well, you don't have to look very far. My notes here for the previous year, 2016, that was a playoff team that lost 43-14 to the Steelers in week 4. And then in 2015, Kansas City lost 5 consecutive games, including an 18-17 loss to the Matt Nagy Bears. No, that was pre-Matt Nagy. A 18-17 loss to the Bears, who were a bad football team. And we were 1-5 before winning 11 consecutive games. And we don't want to talk about that year in the playoffs, but mid-season, poor performance, you see it from everybody. big picture, what I take away from this is the defense right now is better than I thought it was. Harrison Butker has not retired. He will come back and play some more football.
He will be back, and he will still be good at kicking.
And our special teams will not be a giant liability all year. I can say that with complete confidence because we have a fantastic special teams coordinator. We have excellent specialists in the 3 specialist positions. And then you just have to get your athletes to play the rest of those spots better.
I think this is kind of the direction you're going here to close is, and it's all I was thinking, not immediately after the loss, because there was a lot of things I was thinking, but 3, 4 hours later, and it's every year, the last couple of years, it's what I come to after a painful loss is there is not a group of individuals in the entire league that I would count on to get this figured out and corrected more than Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelsey, Eric Bieniemy.
You,
I mean,
you've won 10 you've had 10 consecutive winning seasons, 6 consecutive division championships. After week 3, you are in first place in your division with a tiebreaker against your biggest competitor. Your defense is ahead of schedule. Special teams is going to go back to what it usually is.
and you still have the best quarterback in the world.
Yeah, and that just leaves the offense, and we've got Patrick Mahomes. They're doing a lot of things well, but they need to clean up a few other things.
They're close. They're close.
So I'm not trying to be overly optimistic, just trying to tell you what I see. And I think, as bad as disappointing as that loss was, when you look at what contributed to it, I think it's a lot better than just like if we couldn't stop the run. If they ran for 250 yards on us and scored 42 points.
We didn't even talk about that. That as a whole, I think the run defense in this game was as good as, like,
Excellent.
legitimately as good as you could have asked for. I don't think that no one would have predicted that stat line for, and not that he was terrible or anything, but Jonathan Taylor, this Chiefs defense was not looked at as a great front or anything.
Yeah. So would I like it better if we'd lost this 42-41 and just got throttled? No, because how do you fix that? It's a lot harder to fix than some muffed punts and some fake field goals. Like, we just won't do any more of those.
and yeah, man, I was gonna say something there.
So, record prediction after losing to the lowly Colts is about the same as it was preseason.
I think I will say fairly comfortably that that's the worst game the Chiefs will play all year by a wide margin. That won't be the last time they lose,
Is that a challenge?
but we will not see 19 special teams miscues in a game again this year. And I also don't anticipate the Chiefs will score 17 points in a game again this year.
So I appreciate you taking time to listen to this episode. We'll be back in a couple days with a preview of the Tampa Bay Bucks game, and we'll see you on the next one.